Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with Dr. Musa Kika, the Executive Director of the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. Enjoy this truly inspirational conversation. Dr. Musa Kika, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor. We've finally done it. We've been wanting to do this now for the past 4 weeks, counseling and so forth, until you finally became famous before I could talk to you.
It's very funny, Trevor. We were meant to do this way before all this that has happened. Yeah. But thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely honored.
Fantastic. So, Musa, you turned 31 in April, eh?
Yes.
And I always say I love talking to young minds because the future of this country is in the hands of young people, particularly your generation. You hold a PhD in public law from the University of Cape Town, a Master's of Laws from Harvard Law School, a Bachelor of Laws, summa cum laude. Did I pronounce it well?
That's correct.
That's correct,
yes.
Right, from
yes.
the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes.
You have a certificate in advanced human rights from the Center of Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. And you have a certificate in national dialogue and peace mediation from the Swiss Peace and the University of Basel in Switzerland. And the question is, why law and human rights?
I don't see myself, Trevor, having done any other career. I remember when I was applying for my university degree, the undergrad, the form required me to put 3 options. And number 1 was Bachelor of Laws, number 2 for me was Bachelor of Laws, number 3 was Bachelor of Laws. I had made up my mind that if they don't give me this degree, I'm not going to go to that university. I'll make an alternative plan. I really wanted to do law. I had this image of the law, which I still hold today, of law being a tool that the downtrodden can use to confront naked power. I had this image of the law being a tool that can take people out of oppression and tyranny. I had very early in my high school days been exposed to notions of justice and tyranny. I participated in social clubs at schools like the Child Law Forum Club. There was also a human rights forum, a human rights club at one of the schools. I actually formed the Human Rights Club.
Which school was that?
That's St. John's, Emerald Hill, a mission school. So, you know, in those social clubs at schools, we interacted a lot with issues to do with the human rights, civic awareness. But also, it's because of the material we were interacting with in school. My favorite African author is Chinua Achebe. Material like Entities of the Savannah, which was actually a set book in our A-level, in which he was speaking about the fictional Kangan state. And to me, Kangan was Zimbabwe because of exactly what was transpiring here. So it's those notions of tyranny and justice that led me into wanting to study law. I was also following a lot what was happening on the political scene. So I believed I had an above average appreciation of what was happening politically. Those days I was also in the junior parliament, and I was actually also the junior minister of transport and communications. So those kind of platforms made me a bit more aware, I think, than other children of what was transpiring. But of course, I then went to law school, started first year, and then I later learned, that the law is actually a double-edged sword. It can be used to build, it can be used to destroy, it can be used to build justice, it can be used to subvert justice. Apartheid was a legal system, democracy is a legal system. It's just a matter of you choosing which side you want to be of the law. Yeah, I'm glad I'm still on the side that I went into law school.
And I'm trying to, I hear you already at high school. Law is already has a hold on you. Is there a role model that you saw prior to going to university that made you say, law is the way to go?
None in my family, because I'm actually the first in my family to, to attain a university qualification. But I looked up a lot to those prominent lawyers of the day who were waging the human rights struggle. And some of them, most of them, in fact, we have them today. People like Madam Beatrice Mtetwa, people like Alec Muchadehama. I feel extremely privileged that today I interact and work with these people, in various platforms. These are actually the individuals that I would read a lot about, that I would see. They, to me, portrayed the kind of professional that I wanted to be in the human rights field. Yeah.
And I mean, we talked about law and human rights. Why in particular human rights? Where does it come from for you?
For me, human rights is that branch of law that allows human beings to flourish. It allows us to be equal, notwithstanding the political and the social or economic classes we may be coming from. It allows us all a chance to dream. It allows us all a chance to have a place under the Zimbabwean sun. Also human rights, particularly because, when I was interacting with these political developments of the day, and I was also interacting with this material that I was reading, that I spoke of earlier, issues of oppression, were a key theme across the board. And to me, human rights law was and remains a tool to get people out of oppression. Yeah.
And you've said that law is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
You've had a hectic week or so,
Yeah.
Involved at a very high level with the challenge for the extension of Chief Justice Malava's term. Yes. I know we can't get into the nitty-gritty of that.
Yes.
What has it been like for you? I suspect that it's been emotionally stressing, time and everything else. Talk to us about what this challenge has meant for you.
Trevor, I'm extremely proud that we did this, that I did this with the team that I'm working with, because to me, that's how I imagined myself using the law, to do away with illegalities, to do away with anti-people and unconstitutional stances. To me, this is exactly what I wanted to do with my law degree, and this is exactly what I'm doing. This is something that I feel every other citizen who cares about this nation and where it's going should be doing. This is our country. We own it. We are the stockholders. This constitution is ours. We wrote it. So we have the duty to ensure that we see to the enforcement of this constitution. They say eternal vigilance is the price for freedom. And this is exactly what we are facing right now. It's essentially driving ideals to do with respect for the rule of law, respect for the people who put together this law, respect for judicial independence. Ultimately, that's how we can move forward as a democracy. This is a document, the Constitution, that came about after decades of struggle. Some people died, Trevor, fighting for a new democratic constitution. Our people went out, 94% of them who participated in that referendum in March 2013 and voted in favor. It will be really a sad day if we see unconstitutional things happening and we simply ignore. So it's a proud moment for me that we have been able to do this.
Has it been stressful?
Well, it comes with its own pressures. I have to say this, fighting for constitutionalism and human rights is supposed to be an everyday thing that everyone does. But most people who contacted me when this case was filed, or even after the ruling, were saying, please be safe, or are you safe? And to me, that says something. Fighting for human rights and constitutionalism should not be a health or a life hazard. But unfortunately, it has appeared to be like that in this country, which is one big problem in itself that we ought to address. Yes, of course, it comes with a lot of pressures. It comes with a lot of demands. It gave a lot of hope, Trevor, to people. People felt, okay, so we are actually able to do this and we can actually get a result. It's quite unusual in our society, which is very unfortunate. But people were sort of energized. People wanted to know more about, okay, what were these amendments to the Constitution about? What does the Constitution say? What is going wrong here? So for me, that's one of the reasons why public interest litigation is important. It ignites interest among the people to know their Constitution and to be actual partakers of the processes unfolding in society. There is also, like I said, an expectation for more, but that's when we then need everyone to come on board and contribute with whatever little contribution they can make. We fight from the legal side of things because that's how we have been taught, that's what we are taught. We use the law the best way we know how. But we also require other voices to also come in and support the best way they know how.
Have you had people calling you and saying, why are you doing it?
I have had a couple of phone calls and messages on why I'm doing this. Some of them I respond and explain, some I ignore, depending on the tone that is coming from that kind of communication. But I'm not worried at all, Trevor. It's a constitutional right of mine to do this. It's a responsibility above all else for me to do this. Lawyers don't take oath when they are getting into law school. But when I went to KwaZulu-Natal in our first year, we were made to hold a copy of the Constitution, South African Constitution then, because it's an essay. And we had to take an oath, which I thought was very interesting. But also, when we get admitted, we all stand before a High Court judge and we take oath to defend the Constitution. And I think I'm simply doing my duty in terms of those two oaths that I took.
You, as we were sitting down to start this conversation, you were saying to me that some of your staff are right now busy in the courts. Just outline to us what other activities are around the Chief Justice Malaba case, which you can discuss.
Yes, so like I said, when we filed this case, it excited a lot of interest and action from other quarters. You may probably know that the Zimrights eventually also filed an application challenging the whole scheme of the amendments. In our application, we were simply challenging a very narrow aspect of something that was done illegally and unconstitutionally in our view as a result of the recently passed amendments. The Law Society of Zimbabwe, also to its credit, also stepped up and filed a robust application in the Constitutional Court, again challenging the whole scheme of the amendments. We had the Young Lawyers Association also coming in to join in our application, and these cases were heard together. But there have been also subsequent developments. We filed for contempt of court, because after our ruling, the Chief Justice, as we were made to understand, kept on pitching up for work. And in our view, that's contemptuous conduct. So we filed for contempt. That is again a case that is before the courts. And a number of other citizens who have stood up to say, okay, the Judicial Service Commission, we want to invoke our access to information, freedom to information rights, to get to understand how the process is unfolded within the JSC. So all those are processes that are occurring. But you also have citizens, including colleagues in the media, also doing their own to inform people, also to seek information, and that is extremely important. Yes.
I've sensed, I don't know if you have, a lot of excitement, a lot of positivity. It's as if the initiative that you took breathed some hope into this nation. Is that the sense that you're getting?
Definitely, definitely. In my view, that actually was a trigger of the subsequent actions that we saw down the line. We have a lot of lessons that we can draw from elsewhere. The civil rights movement in the US, where those who were at the forefront would say, things like small victories are important in a struggle because they give hope that, okay, we can attain what we are trying to attain. They energize the people. If you are losing at every twist and turn, if you are not succeeding, if you are not seeing the light at every twist and turn, you tend to start doubting what you're doing, even though your heart and your minds are in the right place. You know exactly what you're fighting. In our case, it's the promise and aspiration given to us by the Constitution. That's what we are trying to attain. So these victories, they restore hope. But they also bring a lot of confidence to what we have in terms of the systems, right? People begin to say, okay, the judiciary is actually, an institution in terms of our Constitution that we can resort to. And that's important in a constitutional democracy, because what sustains democracy is what the citizens do. We turn our vigilance. It's also how our institutions behave and perform. That sustains democracy.
Help us understand, like you said, you went for a narrow aspect of the amendments. Help us understand the whole package of the amendments that were brought before Parliament and approved. What were these and what that means, and indeed, in your understanding and reading, why these amendments were seen to be necessary?
I very much like your last words. Why were these seen to be necessary? That assumes that necessity is what should drive action. And that's exactly what we are looking at. I'll return to that. But the recent amendments were the second set of amendments in our 8-year-old Constitution. The first amendments were in September 2017. They were to do with the appointment of the heads of courts, the Deputy Chief Justice, the Chief Justice, and the President of the High Court, the Judge President. When we adopted our Constitution in 2013, we had said we wanted a much more open, transparent, participatory way of appointing judges. So we adopted a good regional and global standard, where we nominate anyone, including yourself and I, can nominate judges. They go for public interviews where everyone can attend, where the media is there. Names are forwarded to the president for consideration. Judges are appointed. So in September 2017, our government said we don't want that process for the Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, and Judge President. Again, the necessity, the reason, we are not sure. So that was done. Of course, that was later fought in the courts. The process had to go back to Parliament. And I think a month before Amendment Number 2 was passed, that bill was passed, sort of correcting the mistake that had been done. In our view, that whole process again was unconstitutional and illegal. But that's another topic. Amendment Number 2 was first gazetted as a bill on 31 December 2019, New Year's Eve at night. Another bill was then gazetted on 17 January to correct some mistakes that had been made in the original gazetting. This amendment bill had 27 sections, which was changing in excess of 20 provisions of our Constitution. We were changing, in addition to the Deputy Chief Justice, Chief Justice, and Judge President, we are now saying all the judges of the Supreme Court and Constitutional Court, we don't need public interviews. The president can simply pick the ones that he wants, and those that become judges. We were taking away certain powers from Parliament. When our executive negotiates for certain lines of credits, agreements with platforms, multilateral institutions, individual countries outside our borders, Parliament has to be aware of that, because Parliament provides what we call a check and balance. We have what we call a trias politica system of government, where you have the judiciary, the executive, and Parliament, each providing a check on each other to avoid abuse of power and absolutism. So we took away those powers from Parliament to say Parliament does not need to know, things can just be done by the executive. We changed the way in which the Prosecutor General is appointed. The Prosecutor General is the head of the National Prosecuting Authority. He decides who is prosecuted and who is not, and how someone is prosecuted. That person was appointed through a public process, public interviews, etc. Now that person is appointed by the president and is removed from office by the president. We removed the running mate clause, whereby during a presidential election, a presidential candidate has a running mate or running mates. So when these are voted, they are voted together by the people, such that if the president for any reason is unable to exercise his powers, the vice president, who has also been voted by the people, who has popular mandate, becomes president. We removed that. Now it's the president who appoints the vice president and fires them at will. And many other amendments, Trevor. The running theme is concentrating power in the hands of the president. This is how our Lancaster House Constitution of 1979 was. This is what we rejected in 2013. So we are now bringing it back. What does it mean? We are 8 years into this Constitution. Is it really necessary to have all those amendments at this stage? Some of them, by the way, we have not tried them. The running mate clause was meant to start in 2023. Some of the provisions on devolution, we haven't yet implemented devolution, but this amendment bill was also revising the provisions on devolution. Why? Have we tested these things and we have seen that they don't work, right? What are the people saying? There were public consultations done in July 2020. People overwhelmingly said no to these amendments. Unfortunately, we saw Parliament proceeding. What is the effect? Right, let me respond to that. Constitutions can be amended. They can be amended when necessary. Thomas Jefferson says you can't expect an old man to still wear the coat they were wearing when they were young, and you expect it to fit. Yeah. So constitutions can change when they need to be changed. He also says, you know, laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the general progress of the human mind. So as things become necessary, we need to adjust. But necessity is the underlying word. We can't resort to amending the Constitution as a first resort. If we are able to change the way we interpret the Constitution in a way that is progressive and that updates the meaning of that Constitution, that has to be resorted to. If the absolute necessity to amend the Constitution comes, then amendments must be kept at a minimum. You can't have a bill that is changing 20 plus things over a range of things, including things we haven't tested and implemented. Something should be wrong.
So proceed.
But even then, Trevor, we have to respect what we call the basic structure doctrine. The values and principles that underlie our democratic society, they are in Section 3 of the Constitution. Separation of powers. So if you are to amend, you can't taper around with separation of powers. What it means, if you are to amend, you can't take certain powers from one arm and put them in another. You are tampering with the separation of powers. Right? You can't tamper with judicial independence. It's a value in terms of Section 3. If judges are to be appointed publicly in a process where everyone participates, let's do that. But if you are to say one person appoints and fires, there's a problem. Right? So that is called the basic structure doctrine. It's called the founding values that we ought to respect. So you have countries like Germany that have then gone on to develop principles such as unconstitutional constitutional amendments to say, no, this is not in line with the basic structure of our Constitution. You are mutilating the Constitution out of recognition. Unfortunately, this is what we are doing.
Why? Why do you think we're doing that?
Two things. Number one, there's a sincerity question. When we negotiated this Constitution between 2010 to 2013, the COPAC process, we had a unity government. There were some tussles, right? The current government has expressly come out in the open to say things like the running mate clause we never wanted anyway. So there is a sincerity issue. Some of the things were agreed to because it was the prudent thing to do then to buy time, and to buy their chances of remaining in government. So at the first opportunity, things are being undone. That's why after the unity government dissolved, we saw amendment number 1. A few years down the line, amendment number 2, changing 20 plus things that have not been tested. So there's a sincerity question. But the second issue is what I call performing democracy. We like having the outward appearance of being a democratic state, but in reality we are performing democracy. We have institutions, we do elections every 5 years, but the substance of it is very elusive. That is one way of killing democracy. There's a whole body of work, academic work out there, which shows how nations, leaders, governments destroy democracy. We no longer destroy democracy through coups nowadays, although now and again we do them. We now destroy democracy through performing it, faking it. But what you do is you then give democratic regression legal cover. You go to parliament and you do a process of amending the constitution. It all appears legit and legal, but you're actually taking us back to where we were before we had this progressive constitution.
Essentially what you're saying questions the commitment to democracy as far as the ruling party is concerned, isn't it?
Precisely. There is no question about that. Okay, if the ruling party felt it necessary to amend the constitution, then follow the process. Then respect what the people are saying. Consultations were done as required by the constitution, and the people said, no, we don't want the amendments. Please focus on implementing the constitution. But still you proceed in parliament and you get the bill to be passed. Just as fast as it is passed, the president signs it. And just as soon as the president signs, we start seeing certain acts like extending the tenure of the Chief Justice. It gives the impression that this was all a scheme. Yeah.
Do you get the sense that our constitution, like you said, is under assault? There is a deliberate plan and process in place to assault our constitution, the one that we invested so much time and money to construct and put together.
Definitely. The constitution is directly under assault, it's indirectly under assault. Already it's being mutilated out of recognition, as I say. The founding values are being thrown off the window. That's number one. But we are also seeing an assault in the form of attitudes, refusal to implement the constitution. We are also seeing an assault through what we are doing with the legislation. Our legislation or acts of parliament must align to the constitution. They cannot say something that is against what the constitution says. We did away with acts like POSA. We came up with the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, which in many ways is POSA back, under a new title. That is contrary to what the constitution requires. You have the government declaring its intent to amend the Private Voluntary Organizations Act to have greater scrutiny over CSOs, associations. You have the government promising us what they call a patriot bill to do away with certain freedoms that people have in terms of their constitution. That's assault. You can see what is happening in the criminal courts, Trevor, when individuals who are tamed or deemed to be critics or to be anti-government are treated in a way that is different from those who are stealing 60 million. One who is being said to have been blowing a whistle in town is denied bail and they go to Chikurubi for 40 days plus. One who stole 20 million, 60 million, goes to the Magistrates Court. They are granted bail instantly and you never hear about that case ever again. That is an assault to our constitution.
We've been wondering, Musa, why we say we've got a great constitution, why the other laws are not being aligned to this constitution. I think we now know the answer, isn't it?
The answer is there. It's an issue of commitment and sincerity.
Right.
There is actually
They
no
never
desire.
liked this constitution.
They never liked it. They never liked it. They are not going to implement what they don't like. It's going to reform them out of power, as they say. Yeah.
If that being the case, congratulations to you and everybody else involved in launching the Constitutional Law Center, which is a great initiative. Well done to you and Dr. Alex Magaisa for this initiative. When the Constitution is being assaulted, you celebrated the 8th anniversary of our Constitution, which is being assaulted, which again gives people the hope that there is a body of people out there who are concerned about the assault that is being waged against our Constitution. So well done for that. Talk to us about the thinking behind the Constitutional Law Center. And I know that you and Dr. Magaisa presented a report. If you could just, in a nutshell, give us the salient points of that report that you presented at the 8th celebration of our Constitution?
Yes, I'll speak to the report first, Trevor.
Yes.
The report is called Learning to Walk. Constitutionalism is a journey. This is just a document. It's not self-executing. If you pass this, put it in a drawer, that's it. It won't do anything. You have to have people who then operationalize that document.
Yeah.
So it's a journey. You give birth to this document. It learns to walk. It starts running. It starts flying. So the report is called Learning to Walk. It's essentially an audit of how we have performed as a country in implementing this constitution since 2013. That was the report. Dr. Magaisa worked on a lot of aspects. I worked on other sections. We actually traced also the jurisprudence, the judgments that have come from our superior courts, the High Court, the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court. Those are mandated to interpret this constitution. So we were looking at the judgments to say, okay, let's audit what's coming from our courts. So that was the report. It's very easy to read. It's meant for consumption by the general public, not by legal practitioners or people with some technical expertise. The Constitutional Law Center is a monumental development in the history of constitutionalism in Zimbabwe. This is not novel. Progressive countries of the world have hundreds of centers of this and that. These are meant to be think tanks, to develop ideas around how we can better derive benefit from our constitution. These are meant to be information hubs, where information is developed, generated, packaged, and disseminated for public consultations. This is meant to be a platform where people come together and resist mutilation of the Constitution. We had not had such a center in the history of independent Zimbabwe, and we thought this was extremely important. Dr. Magaisa and others have been doing a lot of work over the years, writing material, explaining the Constitution, interrogating certain legal issues. And this institution, the Constitutional Law Center, is a way of bringing all that together and say, let's institutionalize, let's document this, let's do it together with others. So we have a number of civil society organizations, Zim Rights, the Forum, Wild, We Lead, Justice for Children, Center for Applied Legal Research, all coming together and say, look, let's put our hands together and drive the agenda of constitutionalism. So this is what this center is all about. In the coming months and years, we should be seeing a lot of interesting and exciting stuff.
Well done.
Yes.
Well done. As you say, this is my constitution.
Yes.
This is your constitution. This is our constitution. But what do we do to ensure that the men and the women in the street get to that sense of ownership, taking pride, defending this constitution? What needs to be done?
We call this document the social contract. It's a contract, it's an agreement by all of us on how we want to govern ourselves, and we have set benchmarks of what we are aspiring to. We have set promises in the Constitution that we want to all attain. If you don't stand, by your side of the contract, the other side will run with it. It's basic like that. Take it as a contract. If you slip on a contract that you are a party to, the other party can infringe it and you don't see it. Or perhaps you see it but you don't take action. That's why the Constitution starts by saying we the people. It's our document, it's our social contract. But we anticipated when we were drafting this Constitution that if people don't know about this Constitution, it's easy for it to be violated. If people don't know about this Constitution, it's difficult for it to be enforced. So there are clauses that were inserted there, mandating the government to ensure that this document is translated in all official languages, mandating that this Constitution should be taught in schools, in universities, and should be part of civic education even outside the schooling system. How much of that is being done? Very little. Very little. This document, everyone should have it in their house, just like everyone may have a copy of the Bible. Everyone should have this. Every student should be given this as part of an orientation package when they enter an institution, primary, secondary, or tertiary. In my cabinet at home, I have tons of South African constitutions.
The little ones.
Pocket size.
Yeah.
You know, because you get it everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, you go to school, orientation package it's there. You go to a special event at school, the Constitution is there. You go to an event somewhere, the Constitution is there. That's how it ought to be. That's how it ought to be. But then some people say, well, the Constitution is the country's best kept secret. That's deliberate. Because if you know what's in this Constitution, you're going to demand it. Right? So it's such a powerful tool that people should have, that people should familiarize themselves with.
I take it the Law Center is going to be doing a lot of that, hey?
We are going to be doing a lot of that. In fact, on the launch of that center, we were distributing copies. We purchased a lot of constitutions and we were distributing them in town. And we hope to continue doing that. Yes.
Wonderful. Let's go to your daily job. You are the executive director of the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. You essentially lead a coalition of 22 frontline human rights organizations. This must be a hot seat, Musa.
It is a hot seat. It's a place of significant growth. I have only been in this job really for a couple of months. I think I'm aging towards the year mark now. But it's a huge responsibility that requires you to really give all you can to ensure that our membership, the 22 organizations, are served. So what I lead is the secretariat. It's the 22 organizations that came together into a coalition, and then there's a secretariat to serve the agenda of this coalition. And that's what I lead. Overall, I think I have really grown and benefited a lot in the few months that I have been in this role. I think it's something that I don't take lightly, the growth, the lessons, but most importantly, the opportunity to serve your nation. Because we do this in defense of the Constitution, the law, in defense of human rights, in defense of the citizens that we serve. Yeah.
Tell me, what are the issues, the burning issues that human rights defenders that you work with face on a daily basis?
Human rights defenders are pushing for human rights. They are pushing for respect of the law. If you do that in the face of people in authority who do not want that law to be followed, who don't want you and I and everyone to have their human rights, you are bound to be on a collision course. So earlier I spoke about the treatment of human rights defenders or perceived critics in the criminal courts, where if you are arrested for protesting against an illegality, you are an enemy of the state. So you are supposed to be denied bail. You are supposed to go to Chikurubi. Eventually the High Court may give you bail, but you have already been punished, without being found guilty. That's actually what we have been seeing happening. Sometimes the cases are then thrown off the court, but you were in Chikurubi for 40 days.
Yeah.
No one is going to compensate you for that. That's actually what we have been witnessing. We have been recording even the most grievous forms of torture, abductions, abuse. This is all public knowledge. That's coupled by impunity. In this country, we do not have anyone in recent years who has been arrested or prosecuted for abductions and torture. But this is happening every other year. This is happening every other month. And that's a problem. So there is a security risk to doing human rights defense work.
Are you hopeful?
I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful. Trevor, we are seeing new energy coming into the front lines. Young people who are coming up and saying, this is our constitution, this is our country, this is our future. We are going to defend it. That's extremely important. Yes.
Tell me, there's a notion that in certain circles that human rights is a foreign concept. Human rights is not an African thing, point number one. And then the other issue is to buttress that point is then to say, it's foreigners who are interested in human rights, and which is why, you know, the NGOs, civil society organizations that are in the forefront of fighting for human rights are being funded by foreigners. What's your take on that? What's your response? What's your pushback on that kind of thinking?
Yeah, that kind of thinking, in law we call it approbating and reprobating at the same time. I'll say something that Beatrice Mutetwa said when we launched the Constitutional Law Center. This constitution was voted for by 94% of the Zimbabweans who voted. It was voted by the Zimbabwean parliament made up of Zimbabweans. It was signed by a Zimbabwean president. And when we say this is ours and we want to defend it, it's our thing. We created it. All of us, including those who are saying human rights are Western. But let's bring it home. There is nothing Western about you not having your house demolished without a court order. There is nothing Western about saying you can't be tortured. There is nothing Western about saying, let's respect your dignity. Let's give you the right to an education. Let's give you access to health care. You must be treated equally. There is nothing Western about that. It's all Zimbabwean. It's all African. These are also our aspirations as Zimbabwean and Africans. It borders on insulting people's intelligence when you say, you are only saying human rights because someone is telling you to say it or someone is funding you. This is about our lives, you know, people demanding space and recognition under the Zimbabwean sun. You don't need any Western embassy to tell you that you are hungry, or that you have been tortured and it's not right, or that you are being treated unequally. You don't need any Western embassy to do that. But coming to the funding issue, a lot of civil society organizations in Zimbabwe and Africa tend to be funded by development agencies. Some of them are foreign missions of the developed countries, which are predominantly Western. Now and again, we are seeing more and more of the Asian countries also coming up with overseas development agencies, and they are increasingly supporting civic work. Civic work is supposed to be funded by the government. The government is supposed to fund NGOs. It doesn't happen in this country for obvious reasons. So when civic society then receives funding from foreign development agencies, the government then comes up with the card of saying you are Western or serving foreign interest, which is really not the case. If the government was playing its role of supporting civic work, you would not have this issue of anyone outside our borders coming to support development and democracy.
But they wouldn't do that because they don't like the Constitution.
Yes.
They don't like human rights. They're
Yes.
essentially wanting to cripple NGOs. What about the issue of the private sector?
Yes.
You know, our own Zimbabweans, philanthropists, chief executives and so forth chipping in. Do you see any of that happening? I mean, you don't have to mention names. Do you see any of that happening?
Not as much as we expect, Trevor. We are supposed to be seeing the private sector coming in to support development work, philanthropy. I don't think we have had that much of a culture, but really we can't pin that on the private sector. It's the economy. When the economy doesn't function and the private sector is also battling for survival, there is no resources to spare, you know, so easily to support, other work. But these funds that come from development agencies or foreign governments, overseas missions and offices, they are actually citizen and private sector funds in those countries that are pulled together to then come and support, democracy and development work in other countries. If you really trace the genesis of those resources, you will see that it's actually taxpayers' money that is supporting that. Here, unfortunately, because of the economic situation, we are not seeing many of our private players coming in. But the private sector is a key partner and stakeholder in this. It's part of citizenship, corporate citizenship, where we are supposed to support development work. This is not a sideshow. It's not side work. It's actually work that is at the center of our very existence and well-being.
I know one of your passions is justice for children.
Yes.
How are we doing on that score as a society?
Yes. The 2013 Constitution brought in a whole range of provisions for children. We have a whole dedicated section, Section 81, speaking about children and how they are supposed to be treated. We didn't have that in the Lancaster House Constitution. It's a big plus. In our courts, there are issues that are seen to be softer issues. Child protection issues, in my view, is one of those issues. We have been seeing some really progressive jurisprudence coming out of some of the courts. You would recall the Constitutional Court judgment on child marriages,
yes,
which outlawed a celebrated judgment globally. We have seen the Constitutional Court judgment confirming a High Court judgment outlawing corporal punishment, to say you can't beat children, it's inhuman. That is judicial corporal punishment. We have seen judgments around protecting the right to education, protecting children from being sent home from school for non-payment of fees, for instance. And a whole range. We have seen judgments around issues of freedom of religion.
So we are in a good place.
We are not where we must be,
Yeah.
but the Constitution has given us a glimmer of hope, and we are seeing increasingly there being traction towards protecting the child.
Okay.
But of course, that doesn't just do it on its own. You also need the socio-economic dynamics to also come in and support. The economy, again, is a big letdown. Resources that are supposed to be channeled towards education, access to healthcare, we see there being massive gaps. But we are edging towards the mark.
Are you concerned about the independence of the judiciary?
Definitely, that's a concern. Because like I said earlier, you have three arms of government which are equal. They are all supposed to be independent. The judiciary especially is supposed to express its fidelity to the law and to the law alone, and to no one else. We have not always seen that happening. We have had episodes of concern. We have had issues emanating from the judiciary itself. You would remember the Justice Ndewere issue.
Yeah.
That was in the public domain, where certain things were put on affidavit, under oath, to say certain things were happening in the judiciary that were not supposed to be happening. It's an issue of great concern. The whole basis of us fighting this battle currently is to preserve independence of the judiciary, where we are saying, no, let's appoint judges in a transparent manner, where the Constitution says this person can no longer be in office beyond this. Let's respect that, because we want judges to be independent and free to discharge the mandate of their office without fear or favor. Yes.
Let's go now to talk about Dr. Musa Kika. Where were you born? Where were you raised? Which schools did you go to?
Yeah, so I was born on 28 April, a few days after independence in 1990, independence celebrations in 1990. I was born in Harare, and I grew up in Harare. I attended...
Which schools did you go to?
So for my primary school, I went to Alfred Bate Primary School in Maverick. I was there until my grade 6, and then I moved to Nyamangara Primary School in my rural home in Zimba. That was after my father died. Some family disturbances that then led me to go to my rural home to finish off. So I did my grade 6 and 7 there. Came back to Harare. I was at Zimbabwe 2 High School for Form 1 to Form 4. I was at St. John's for Form 5 and 6. And then eventually I left the country for my tertiary education. Yes.
Who has been the biggest influence in your life?
Well, I think in my formative years, it has really been my parents. The values that I live on today are values that I essentially learned from my parents. Values of putting family first. Because after all is said and done, our families are the most important part of our lives. The values of hard work and an honest living, those are extremely important values that have lived with me. When we grew up, we didn't have much. My parents would struggle, but in that struggle, they would ensure that their family is well catered for. They didn't have an education, formal education, but they managed to put us through education. I mean, we do what we do today because we were able to be educated through their toiling. So those are the values, you know, that I try to live by today, and that I try to exhibit, ensuring that there's an honest living. I'm doing the best I can to look after those who depend on me. Yes.
I mean, like I said, you are 31. I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself at 31, what I was doing. You've been able to achieve so much. What goals are you setting for yourself going forward?
That's a very big question. That's a very big question. You know, I was able, Trevor, to achieve a lot of things within a shorter space of time than I had anticipated. Which
that has surprised you?
Not that much. Not that much, because when you put in some work, you're also expecting, you know. But, you know, the goodwill of people around who also, because you don't do this alone. You do this because there are people who are supporting you, encouraging you, motivating you, pouring into you. It has, you know, led to this. I came back to Zimbabwe because I really wanted to be here and to make my contribution here. And I think that is happening. Going forward, I really see myself continuing to, you know, contribute to a better society in Zimbabwe in whatever manner I can, particularly through the areas that I feel I'm most competent in. Issues around use of the law, issues around good governance. So I'm here for a while.
You're here for a while.
Yeah.
One of your expertise is negotiation, reconciliation, and peace building.
Yes.
Given where we are as a country right now, our intractable political problems and so forth, do you see dialogue as one of the ways that we could get out of where we are right now?
Yes, we have a number of options. We are effectively in political crisis. And now we are also in a different strand of political crisis that we call constitutional crisis. This is where we are, and we have been for quite some time. You leave political crisis through negotiation, through revolution, or through having the available dispute resolution mechanisms, the judiciary, do its work. So one of these avenues should get us out of this crisis. Elections, we have been doing elections for the longest time.
They haven't worked.
They have not worked. They have failed to get out of this crisis. So we can all look at elections and say, okay, let's put them aside. Dispute resolution mechanisms in terms of our constitution, the judiciary, has that worked? That's a big question. I'm not sure many people would say, well, you know, we have been able to successfully solve all our disputes because of judicial intervention. So some people may want to look at that and say, okay, let's put that aside. Revolution, is it an attractive option? No, it's not, because of what we have seen in the past. We have seen the bloodshed. We have seen that it tends to come in cycles. You may think you have solved the problem today, but wait until 2 years or 5 years down the line, it comes back. Military change of government, coups, are they the solution? No, they are not. Again, we know that coups beget coups. We have seen this also in Africa. That leaves dialogue as one safe win-win avenue that we can explore. It's something we haven't explored to the fullest in Zimbabwe. We have been dialoguing since before independence. 1979, our independence was negotiated. 1987, the Unity Accord. We dialogued in 2009, the Unity Government. We dialogued in coming up with this constitution. But we may now need a new strand of dialogue, which is national in outlook. The ones we have done in the past were political settlements, elite pacts, where the protagonists of the day come together and agree on some power sharing and how to maneuver going forward. But what we need now is dialogue that is centered on crafting a collective national vision, where everyone buys in and say, okay, we are doing this because we want to change. We want to press the reset button. That is something we haven't done in the past. We think it's something that should happen. Unfortunately, for dialogue to happen, you need certain political conditions. You need there to be incentives for the political protagonists of the day to come to the table and to bring their constituencies. You also need the citizenry as a massive and the main constituency to also come and say, okay, this is how we want things to be done. Let's dialogue, let's craft a new vision for our society. I really am a big believer for dialogue. I think our focus now should be on ensuring that the right conditions for dialogue are present, for genuine dialogue to happen. Yeah.
Well, on that helpful or hopeful note, you put in quite a lot of work. I mean, looking at your profile and the work that you've done at 31 says to me, your future looks very bright. And talking to you gives me so much hope about what this country can achieve. What you did 2 weeks ago, challenging the Chief Justice extension of office by the President, gives me so much hope, and I think a lot of people hope. Let me share with the viewers your achievements already. You've had so many awards already. You are a Mandela Rhodes Scholar, a Harvard Kaufman Public Service Fellow, a winner of the University of KwaZulu-Natal Distinguished Student Award. You are a recipient of KwaZulu-Natal Law Society Award, and you've just started.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Trevor, for that. Well, for me, that's also a source of inspiration, even in my own life, to say, look, if I have been able to do this and get this kind of recognition, much more can be done. There is an important point to be made there about youthfulness and what our young people can contribute. It's actually a question that I got in my interview for the role of executive director of the forum, to say, but your age, and I said, well, age really affects people differently. To some, old age may be what brings us back. Some old people may think, we have seen it all, we know it all. They may be averse to change. To some, it makes them arrogant. To some young people, young age makes them foolish and naive. I believe age has not affected me in that manner. And I think there are a lot of brilliant, capable young people in our society, again, of whom young age has not affected them in that manner. We ought to give the young an opportunity to also step forward and lead. After all, the future is young. I often hear of my friends, particularly in business, speaking of what they term a stigma against young people. Challenges accessing lines of credit. Even those who aspire to political office, they find the doors shut. Even in civil society, young people being told, what do you know of the struggle? Go and play and come back when you are much mature. But we are saying young people are a big part of the solution. And let's give them an opportunity. And to young people, they also need to proactively step forward. Yeah.
Talk now, as we conclude, to young people who feel hopeless, but were given hope by what you and the young lawyers did 2 weeks ago. Talk to now to people at home, in the townships, in the rural areas, who feel crushed by the oppression and by the difficult economic circumstances. What keeps you going, and what should they learn from the journey you've walked?
That's a profound question. We have an aspiration. We have a promise that we painted in our Constitution. To me, the Constitution inspires imagination of what Zimbabwe can be. It's a vision that we crafted together to say, this is what we aspire to, this is what we want to achieve. It's very easy for people to look at what's happening now and think, this is it, we are doomed. But the horizons of our lives and of our society are not determined by what's transpiring at the moment. They are not even determined by who is in charge at the moment.
Wow.
Right? People come and go, but our society remains. So for young people, everyone in general, it's fighting towards that mark, that promise that we collectively crafted and say, this is the Zimbabwe we want. It's a promise that we crafted, a vision, an aspiration that we crafted even in the liberation days when some of us were not there. Even post-independence, we kept renewing this vision. To me, that is what should spur us forward. It should re-energize us to say, okay, a better Zimbabwe is possible, a better future is possible. We have lessons from other countries who have been in situations like us. The Asian countries inspire me a lot because of how they have been able to overcome this era and age of oppression into much more open, economically viable societies. They still have their challenges, of course, including governance challenges, but it's not where we are.
So we should keep on dreaming.
We keep on dreaming.
Keep on stretching.
We keep on stretching. The future is young, particularly young people. We can't outsource our future to the old of the day. Yes, the future is ours. It's going to be us who are going to be there. If we are not careful, we will have ruins around us.
Because the old are stepping off the stage.
Yes.
The young ones are coming in.
Exactly. It's a natural process of renewal.
Yeah.
Renewal is something you can't run away from. Either you embrace it or it's simply going to catch up with you. Yes.
Musa, we love books on this show, and I'm sure you have a couple of books that you want to recommend that have impacted your life in a positive manner. Please
yes. I read a lot of biographies.
Right.
But I think let me speak to 3 books. Number 1 is Shoe Dog. By Phil Knight. Right. A memo by the creator of Nike. That book, Trevor,
you are the second person in the past 3 shows that have mentioned that book. Please proceed.
I'm glad to hear that. That book, to me, I feel like it's a handbook of many things. It teaches how to start. It teaches principles of business. It teaches principles of leadership. It teaches that inspiration is everywhere. You know, see it, feel it, test it, run with it. It's a motivating and inspiring book.
It's a manual on how to do life.
It's a manual on how to do life, precisely. Yeah. I would recommend everyone to read it. I have read it a couple of times. The second is Hard Choices by Hillary Clinton. All right. That book, I would recommend it to anyone who is in leadership or aspires to leadership. It talks of the intricacies involved in high-impact decision-making at the highest of levels, including at political levels. So, you know, Hillary takes you into some of the boardrooms and meetings and offices and homes, you know, as hard choices are being made, tough decisions are being made. So anyone who is in leadership, who is involved in tough decision-making, I recommend that book, because ultimately leadership is about the quality of decisions that you make. So that book, I think it would help.
Fantastic.
Yes. The third book is 50 Years of Struggle. The Struggle Continues, 50 Years of Tyranny in Zimbabwe by David Coulthard, our very own. I very much believe in the very near future that book is going to be a set book at various levels, because I think it's one of the most complete collections of our modern history in Zimbabwe. Anyone who wants to understand the struggle we have traversed and our struggles of the present and where we are going, that book is highly recommended.
It's a fantastic book. It's fantastic. Musa, you inspire me quite a lot, and I'm sure this conversation is going to inspire quite a lot of people out there to imagine that you are 31, you are already making waves in a positive way, impacting this nation. You said you were Minister of Transport in
junior parliament. Yes. That was quite interesting.
Yes. I can see you here when I'm using my walking stick, interviewing you as a very important person. We wish you all the very best. Keep the courage going, keep the fire burning, but much more importantly, continue to give us hope and continue to inspire us. Using your legal mind. So thank you so much for coming. I'm delighted that we finally caught you, even when you've become so famous. We were going to interview you before you were famous, but there you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm extremely humbled. I appreciate your platforms. It's one of my favorites. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Musa. Allow me to turn to our viewers who are in Zimbabwe. who are on the continent and all over the diaspora. This is a global conversation. We come out 7 a.m. Monday, Central African Time on YouTube. And to ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations that inspire, that motivate, please click on this subscribe button and you get an alert every time we have one of these quality conversations. We've gone a step further. Scroll down the video and you'll find a link that takes you to our podcast for your listening pleasure. Until next time, thank you for watching and cheers to you all.